I'm a little older, and I used to work in libraries. Anyone in here remember when libraries used to have card catalog? That's what it used to stand for. Library of Congress card catalog number. It actually stands for, they changed it to control number again. But everything's digitized now. I mean, if you find an old card catalog, someone's probably going to take that piece of woodring apart and use it to build furniture or something. Now, you know, card catalogs don't exist anymore. But that now, some publishers or self-publishers will tell you that is optional. Some people will say that's optional, and I guess technically it is. But if you want your product stocked in libraries, that makes it easier for them to catalog it, and there's no fee associated with that particular number. Let me just say this when we get into about the marketing part. Some people forget libraries purchase books. Let me say it again. Some people forget libraries purchase books. You know, we write our book, we want it in the bookstore, we want people to see it, we want it on our website, but we forget that libraries still stock books. Even though so many people like to go online, libraries still stock books. And in fact, libraries even are accessible with electronic books, DVDs, compact discs, and all of the other technological formats. I'm sorry, I keep ignoring you. I apologize.
I'm a librarian, and just to go back to the self-publishing thing, there is a Black Caucus of the American Library Association that you can contact if you have a self-published book and go to their convention and actually do a program or just a reading and sell your books. I talk to a lot of writers and they don't realize it. And every state has a library association that you can go to their convention with your books.
Yes.
And the American Library Association also has a convention.
What was that again?
The Black Caucus.
Well, there's the American Library Association, which is comprehensive in the United States. And they have a convention every year. And you can contact them, you can make arrangements. I'm sure there's a fee involved. And go to their convention with your books. And it's in giant convention centers. And there's always a section where people who have self-published have their books there to sell. The Black Caucus of the American Library Association, which is part of the American Library Association, meets every 2 or 3 years, their own convention of just Black librarians. And you can contact them, you can go online and find their website, Black Caucus of the American Library Association. Contact them, you can go, they're always looking for Black authors. Do a program, do a presentation, you could go and do a presentation. They'd be happy to have you.
Would you believe I'm doing a presentation at the library next week?
Yeah. Right. And there's also, every state has a library association. And they have a yearly convention. And those conventions are broken down. I know in New York State, and I would assume in other states too, but in New York State, we have a New York State Library Association, but it's also broken down into subject sections, like adults, public libraries, young adults, school libraries. So you can go to the individual conventions for whatever you're writing books for teenagers, go to the young adult sections convention, bring your books, do a program, go to the adult public library if you're doing something in reference. So there are many avenues if you're self-publishing where you can actually take your material to a large body of people who will be interested in your stuff and give you wide
publicity.
Yeah.
That's so true. That is so true. So true. And there are thousands of libraries in the country. And you know, and in metropolitan areas, but even in smaller areas, sometimes there's more than one library. Sometimes even one library system will have multiple branches. You know, as well as bookmobiles and services for those who are in home. Sometimes we don't think about that in terms of marketing our product to libraries. And it opens you up to so many more people. It opens you up to a market that you could never reach. People will see your product that you and I could never reach trying to just find them. Just by utilizing services like the library systems. Another key point on that is libraries have many times friends of the library associations, various groups and organizations, meeting rooms where you can have events, book signings, and those types of things. And in many cases, even bookstores have a real focus on local authors. So wherever you are in your particular locale, the bookstore, the library, if you're a published author and you're in this city, you're in this state, hey, they've got to have your stuff. You're a local author. They have to have it. So that opens up so many more markets for you out there. I'm so glad you mentioned teamwork. The traditional publishing industry, and notice I'm not downing the traditional publishing industry, I'm just utilizing the traditional publishing industry as comparison with self-publishers. But the traditional publishing industry will sometimes tell you that there's a limited market for certain things. You know, if you write poetry, there's no market for that. And that's true until you look at the many poets who've been successful. If you're writing fiction and you're a new author, oh no. You're a new author, it's going to buy your fiction. And that's true up until the point that you look at how many people who've been new authors and have been successful with fiction. You're only 22, how are you going to write your autobiography? You haven't lived yet. Look at how many teens, how many young people have written and published their stories that have been extremely popular and profitable to those particular persons. I wrote a book once. Actually, this is the one book that David and I both wrote together. Was a biography / joke book, if you will, of a comedian from the 70s. He just died last year. His name was Rudy Ray Moore. Rudy Ray Moore had a famous character by the name of Dolomite. He had these records out with this Dolomite character, and he did stand up around the country, primarily off the strength of that Dolomite character. He even made a movie, actually made 2 movies with that Dolomite character. Well, we had gone to see Rudy in one of his concert appearances, and for those of you who don't know what kind of material Rudy does, it's very raw. So afterward, we met Rudy and talked to him, and we told him, Rudy, we'd really like to, we said Rudy, we said, Mr. Moore, we'd really like to do a book on you. So he gave me his home phone number. We did a series of interviews over the phone. When he came even to this part of the country, he brought us up, took us backstage. We get into his shows free. He really appreciated the fact that here we were, 2 young men who would actually write a book on him and his career. That has been my own particular writing philosophy. You have to determine what your writing philosophy is. But my particular writing philosophy is that I wanted to focus on contemporary African American culture, and particularly those areas that have been overlooked or unsung. And you cannot believe the way this man felt actually seeing that someone cared enough about his career to write about him and publish a work on him. He was very appreciative of that. Now, if I told you I wrote a book on an old blue X-rated dirty comedian, guess what my top seller was on? Professional wrestling. Now, professional wrestling is kind of like pornography. It has a stigma. But when you look at it, so many people like it, but very few will tell you that publicly. So I wrote this book on professional wrestling, and it was called Black Stars of Professional Wrestling. So it was focused primarily on African American pro wrestling. Still the only book in print on that subject, and 10 years later. And you would not believe how many of those old wrestlers contacted me, How many fans contacted me because no one had ever done anything on these people? David mentioned earlier about your passion. What is your passion? What is it that matters so much to you? What is that story that's been trying to come out of you for so long that you've been keeping inside, that you've been holding down? Every time we did a product, in particular when we wrote about someone else, the response we got was immeasurable. We made money with our books, but the response, having people say thank you, having people say I appreciate what you did for me. My first little publication, 1992, was what was called Saddle Stitched. You know what saddle stitching is? Okay. For those who don't, saddle stitch is like, it's like a little booklet. It doesn't have this is saddle stitch, your handout. Yeah, thank you. Your handout is saddle stitch, with staples in the spine. You see little booklets like that sometimes. That was before we got into perfect binding. Actually, prior to the digital technology coming in the way it has, books were printed with offset printers, and that meant they charged you for every color. You had to pay an additional charge for more colors to your product. So that's why all of our books originally were black and white. We just couldn't afford the different colors. Now with digital, the technology now, that's kind of become, a passe issue unless you're still dealing with some offset printers. But that first book I did, United States versus Hip Hop, a little saddle-stitched 26-page booklet, was talking about rap music from a political standpoint. And if you can remember in 1992, there was a major legal case in rap music around a rap group from Florida that called themselves the 2 Live Crew. And that case was threatening to go all the way to the Supreme Court at one point. It was an obscenity case. They put out music that was actually sampling Rudy Ray Moore. And some of that stuff was considered obscene. And in fact, there were areas of the country that wanted that record banned as being obscene. Well, they had a major legal case over that, and I still have the letter now. My first little publication, the lawyer for the 2 Live Crew contacted me because I had this book out, and they wanted to utilize that as part of their due diligence with the legal case. So my very first foray into publishing, even though I had no money, it was essentially an article that was just printed in book form. It actually started making impact out there in hip-hop. So here we were trying to do things in hip-hop from the music standpoint, and a little book I did actually had more impact on the culture. And so we've continued doing that kind of thing, but everything we've done has always been about uplifting African Americans. Uplifting African Americans. And that's why now I have published the How to Be a Player in the Publishing Industry, because we wanted to now start helping others to find ways to have whatever it took, the motivation, whatever they needed, the technical skills, the knowledge, the know-how, the information to be pointed in the right direction, to be able to finally get their work into print, to get their work published. And black publishers have been doing really well for a long time. For a long time. And black publishers did really well in the early 1990s. One of the famous black publishers that I like is Third World Press. This book here was actually the first nonfiction book by an African American publishing company. #1, New York Times bestseller list. And this is still an independent, black-owned publishing company. Well, how did they market this book? Is anyone familiar with this book?
What's the name of it? Yes.
The Covenant with Black America. I'm sorry. It was called The Covenant with Black America.
Tavis Smiley was all over the place.
Yes. The person who was instrumental in putting this together, Tavis Smiley, at that time was a regular on the Tom Joyner radio show, which is nationally broadcast. Tavis Smiley also had a television show on PBS, the Public Broadcasting Network. So he was reaching millions of people talking about this seminar that, or this, what is that, like a seminar or convention or symposium or something. Yeah, symposium that he does every year, right, where they bring all these thinkers together and influential African Americans together, and they wanted to present during the presidential election, you know, their ideas for what they saw as the main issues in Black America. Well, if you're on television every week, if you're on the radio every week promoting this product, you know, people are hearing about it. But they went even further. You know what they did? They asked people to send in pictures. Pictures of your family. Pictures of your loved ones that have even passed on. If you actually look close at this cover, it's actually a picture of a child made up of hundreds of individual pictures. So if I sent this picture in, and I knew it was going to be published in this book, I'm at least going to purchase it. Brilliant marketing. Brilliant marketing. Brilliant marketing. Perhaps one of the greatest forms of marketing I have ever seen was this little book here called Everything Men Know About Women. Anyone familiar with this book? You say it's a little book. Wait. This is the expanded and updated edition. Okay, check this out. It is written by Dr. Alan Francis. On the back it says, famed psychologist Alan Francis has written a landmark book on men's understanding of the most complex of creatures, women, based on years of research and interviews with thousands of men from all walks of life. The most complete picture ever revealed of man's knowledge of the opposite sex. Fiercely frank and brilliantly insightful, this work spells out everything men know about topics such as making friends with women, romancing women, achieving emotional intimacy with women, making commitments with women, and finally satisfying women in bed. It's all there. 128 pages. Tell us what you see. Self-published. She sold 500,000 copies before selling it to another publisher who then sold another 1 million copies. 1.5 million copies of a book that's 128 pages of blank pages. Am I lying? Is it blank? Am I lying?
Are you serious?
There's not one word in the book. Exactly. Gift shops are primarily what sold so many copies of it. People were, a friend was getting married. People would give that as a gift. Brilliant promotion. Brilliant promotion. So, wait a minute. Think about it. I just showed you a book that sold 1.5 million copies without a single word written.
Isn't that amazing?
Without a single word. Marketing. How do we market our products? How do we market our products? Market. Remember the bookstores, remember the libraries. Yes, I'm sorry.
Let me put this in for a little time. I can contact this person, I don't know her age, because I'm 74 years old and will help you married. 55 years, August the 16th. So should I contact her to fill in the papers?
Right.
Okay.
Well, we got to be creative, okay? When we market our products, we got to be creative. We can't just look traditionally because we're not coming from the traditional publishing industry, particularly if you self-publish. So you got to find ways to get people to pay attention to you and your products that you're putting out there. What if you don't necessarily have the story in your mind? What if there's something you would like to publish, but you don't necessarily think that you have what it takes to write the book, but you'd like to publish? How many of you are familiar with the public domain? The public domain, there are many books that we talked about earlier that either the copyright has expired, or the copyright wasn't renewed, or the copyright may have never been properly filed, and the book is available in the public domain. With public domain books, here's an example of one. It's called Stolen Legacy by George G.M. James. It was actually originally published in 1954. Professor James was a professor at first Livingstone College in this part of the country, and later at the University of Arkansas Pine Bluff, 2 HBCUs. He was a professor at that time, at the time he wrote this, University of Arkansas Pine Bluff. And the subheading here is Greek philosophy is stolen from Egyptian philosophy. He had all of this information in here, but the book is in the public domain. I know of at least 5 companies right now that are publishing this book. Right now. Carter G. Woodson, the father of black history. Carter G. Woodson's famous book, The Miseducation of the Negro, is in the public domain. No one owns a copyright on it. There's several companies republishing that book. That's another option for you as well as a publisher. I told you my first little book was called United States versus Hip Hop. Well, the second book I actually published was a public domain book called The Genius of Huey P. Newton. Huey P. Newton was the co-founder and leader of the Black Panther Party in the 1960s. And one of the little publications they had as a fundraiser, he was in prison and they had this Free Huey campaign. So they had all these different fundraisers, but they had this little booklet with just his ideas in writing. And that book was in the public domain. I republished that book in 1994, and it is still on the market today. So there are a lot of products out there, and they have valuable information that people need that are buried somewhere in libraries or in someone's closet, someone's bookshelf, that will be really beneficial to a lot of people out there if we put them back out.
Yes. When you say you republished it, that meant that you now are the owners of that property?
Good question. So the way I phrase that is kind of a misnomer. I reprinted it essentially under my publishing company name. Essentially. And how that is, and that's why I said, like with this one, I know of at least 5 companies that have versions of this book. What people do when they republish, they'll put their own introduction in there. They'll put maybe an afterword or a foreword.
Change the cover.
They'll change the cover. Yeah. But the information in the same is still the same.
So do you now have to pay royalties to someone?
Nope.
You're not paying any
Nope,
royalties?
because there's no copyright owner on it. It's public domain. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Do you change the name?
No.
Do you still keep his name?
Yes.
So you still get the
Yes.
credit for writing?
Yes. The author and all of the content still. But I have seen people leave certain things out, add certain things.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
If something is in the public domain, could you copyright it? Could someone say, okay, I'm going to republish, as you did the Huey P. Newton book, can you then copyright the book? Can you do that? Or can someone?
When I did it, that wasn't an option.
Okay.
Again, copyright law changed. I have seen here lately where people have bought the rights to a product that had been previously published. I don't know what that process is. I assume it entails a certain fee that I may not have at the moment.
Because if you think about it, then people would take the songs like Happy Birthday and songs that are
Public domain.
public domain and like make money.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the big thing with Disney, because they're trying to like copyright certain fairy tales that have no author. like Sleeping Beauty, for just the name, or something, or Goldilocks, or something, that has no author, really. It's a folk tale, it's not handed down from generation. And what Disney is trying to do is to get control of those things, those fairy tales, and copyright them under the Disney logo, which would be, I mean, then they could change it or do whatever they want. So it's very controversial.
And I think it should be.
They're changing heritage. I mean, can you imagine
Yeah.
someone were to copyright, say, Brer Rabbit? But that has
They
an
did that with Song of the South. Which
Well, no, they
remember Song of the South? They never. It's not even in America. You can't even see that on the
Are you
cartoon in
serious?
America. If you want to see Song of the South, you have to go to Europe in order to get it and purchase it and bring it back into the States because it was such a controversial piece. And they were like, no, we don't even want to be.
We don't even
associated
want to be.
because, and I was wondering if they would ever bring it back out because if they did, it would still have that thing of the controversy behind it. You know, you remember the whole Brer Rabbit with the
And it's interesting that you mentioned that because that is the case with, you know, remember the first black television show on network television? Or show with Amos and Andy. That's now in the public domain. Why? Because it's so controversial, no one wants to, and I've seen several different companies that put out like DVD collections of all the shows. There's several companies doing that because now it's in the public domain. It was so controversial that, you know, no one has any ownership of that particular thing right now, or that particular television series because of controversy.
Is there a copyright that's perpetual, that just goes on and on?
At this point, I know with literary work, if I'm not mistaken, last time I saw it, it was like, what was it, like 75 years or something of that nature? And then maybe like 50 years after the death of the author or something, which is why now in 2009, a lot of the products from 1920, 1930, 1940 now, if the author has passed on and has been passed on at least 55 years, but don't quote me on that. You know, again, you have to do your own research on that.
Let me somewhat interject on that. The internet has changed everything. There's a new digital millennium, something like that, that's basically changed all of those copyright rules because it's now international, worldwide. So, and different states have their copyright laws. It's just a complete mess because of the internet.
The reason I ask that is because the play and novel Porgy and Bess cannot be played. I mean, you'll never see it on TV. And the family, the DeVos Hayward family, they have such control over it. I live in Charleston, where where it was written, and folks wanted to do it, and the family said no. And I mean, even to this day, I mean, you know, that's been around since the 1930s, you know. And so I was just wondering how they still had.
Now, copyright can be renewed. They can be renewed.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they can be renewed. But that's what happens sometimes. I'm sorry.
That's how Michael Jackson got the Beatles and stuff.
Yes. Yes. Now we have to make sure our heirs, you know, realize the value of what we lived in. And that.
Well, does the family, I mean, get first dibs? Like in the Beatles situation, it seems like family members.
I know I think he's late now, Al Hendricks, had over a 10-year battle over his son Jimi Hendrix' legal work. So I don't know, but then there could be some convolution with what kind of contracts people have with whom. Sometimes we are so creative, we do things on a whim. And it turns out to be something great. And we just aren't thinking about how great it is. Someone else sitting there saying, I can market that. Sign this. The rapper Wise Intelligent from the group Four Righteous Teachers was talking recently, where he said, you know, you get a lot of these little rap kids that want to make rap records, and they're poor, and somebody says, I'm going to give you $500,000 to call your people niggas, they'll make all kind of nigger records. They don't know, and there's the money there. You know, we never know what people have signed in terms of legal documents sometimes, and it gets real interesting. I'm glad Dave brought up about the internet.